Hello everyone, I hope you're taking it easy and your day has been great thus far. For this video we'll be going through an unboxing and review of Studio Series Deluxe Brawn, and this version of Brawn is from the Transformers Bumblebee movie, and as a figure, this was released sometime in 2022. I feel early 2022, but here comes the caveat. Now this version of Brawn is actually the Takara Tomy version of Brawn, not the Hasbro version, because for some bizarre reason he was hard to source domestically. So I was very lucky that the Takara Tomy version of Brawn was available at HobbyLink Japan. It's not the first time I've had to use HobbyLink to fill in some of my missing figures. I'm definitely glad he was there, and I actually checked, he's actually still there. So I'll have a link to Brawn at HobbyLink in the description for anyone who by chance is missing out a Brawn. So with that being said, being Takara Tomy, the numbering will be slightly different. Obviously there'll be more Japanese than English, but we'll get through things. So front of the box, to be honest, I don't know why Hasbro couldn't have done this for everything. Sure, we don't get to see the figure, but the figure is enclosed, which is a good thing. We do get like a nice solid CGI image of the figure, in this case being Brawn, and we still get an image of Brawn's actual vehicle mode per the actual figure. So I think there's a lot of benefit to this particular styling as opposed to having the plastic window, or more to the point the absence of a plastic window, but everyone's mileage will vary. Either way, they have done quite nicely with their box. So that's the front of the box. Brawn, Studio Series 83. Even though it's Takara Tomy, there's still some commonality between the Hasbro Studio Series and the Takara Tomy. Obviously, side of the box is probably quite similar. Although I look at Brawn's head and he does remind me of the Juggernaut. And the other side. Turn to the back. So we have, and this is where this will unfortunately still be predominantly Japanese, but Brawn in his robot mode, Brawn in his vehicle mode. Not too sure how many steps for transformation. Time will tell. So now we've had a quick look at the box, time to open up the box and have a better look at the inclusions. And with Brawn out of his packaging. So standard manual, which is good. We have Brawn himself. He has two accessories, which we will look at in a brief moment. And what isn't on camera is his backdrop. So even though Takara Tomy has done some slightly different packaging, the inclusions are the same. I will admit the cardstock that Brawn is attached to was actually just plain cardboard, so in a way that was actually a nice thing to do. Instead of having it as a printed backdrop, which is a copy of the soon-to-be revealed backdrop. So Brawn, since you're pretty much in a nice static pose, in terms of your backdrop, well, I think we've seen this backdrop plenty of times. Now, oddly enough, unlike the Hasbro ones, the backdrop will not be numbered with the release, so this is very much just your generic Cybertron Falls backdrop. But it does look quite nice with Brawn there as well. So, very nice. And that's the standard backdrop. Brawn, we'll look at you in a minute. Manual. Nice image of Brawn there. So we pretty much have the steps on how to store Brawn's weapons whilst he is in his robot mode. So his main weapon will attach to his back and the additional accessory will attach to that. And then the first 9 steps of transformation. So you'll have a bit of a top-off shell, which isn't unsurprising for a lot of these Cybertronian modes. His arms don't look too complicated, which is good. And then the remaining 18, well, not 18 steps, but the remaining 9 steps, so 18 steps in total. So he's not riddled with transformation, which is okay. It's probably a bit of a relief from some of the other ones, especially Wheeljack, who was about 31 steps. Definitely not too involved, but it does look like we will have some tabbing opportunities as well to hopefully keep everything nicely together. And then lastly, how to attach his accessories in his vehicle mode, which is very nice. That is the manual. I will probably need that later on. So, Brawn. Let's have a look at your accessories. So before I hold you, so there's accessory number 1, standard ranged weapon, and then accessory number 2. Not too sure what you're supposed to be. Doesn't move unfortunately, but it is in a very nice two-tone color. And I think so. Can obviously do that. And if I was to attach this to his back, so he will have a nice little tab there. So there's one way of doing it. Looks a little bit clunky. I mean, doesn't look too flush, but it looks like there might be another tab here, which does make it a little bit more flush, but it doesn't sit as securely. So to be honest, I almost like it that way. So that's if we store the weapons in terms of actually using them. So this can be equipped into the hand like so, and the other weapon into the other hand like so as well. So there we go. Brawn equipped with both his weapons. I do feel like his main weapon is almost as long as he is, but otherwise definitely not too shabby. So the weapons now looked at, we will definitely look at these once again in his vehicle mode. So, Brawn. Before we get too involved, can you stand on your own 2 feet? Yes, you can. So, Brawn from the front, Brawn from the side, the back, the other side, and the front again. In fact, here is a close-up of Brawn's torso and his head. It's unfortunate that a lot of his head is actually recessed within his, I dare say, outer helmet, but it does look like he has some nice, well, not articulation, nice detailing in there. In terms of colours, so we're sporting a bit of a ochre yellow, I dare say. Some nice olive green, some dark grey, and some silver trimming and things like that. So colour palette wise, Brawn is looking very nice, and he also has a nice Autobot logo emblazoned on his chest. So I think colours look very cool. They're nicely dispersed throughout the figure, so it does help break things up a little bit, especially with the green. It's quite evident from the bottom to the top, and even with the ochre, he does have a little bit down here on his feet, but it's broken up quite nicely in between things. The silver on his head is quite, well, it's not super bright, but it definitely has a nice shine to it. So yeah, definitely not too bad. I quite like the visual aesthetic for Brawn. He does feel like he's going to be shorter than some of the other Autobots, which I believe is generally correct. Even in G1, Brawn was not an overly tall Autobot. Okay, so we've had a look at colours, detailing, very nice. So colours, we've had a look at Brawn from a few different angles. Articulation. Now, even though his head is within his main torso body, he will have some side to side with his head, but that's about it. So he probably has one of the more restrictive heads of all the Deluxes, where he's pretty much limited to just side-to-side rotation with his head, and there doesn't appear to be much up and down either, so posing wise he can pretty much look either to the front, to the left, or to the right. In terms of the arms, so the arm can do a full 360 here thanks to that nice ball socket in there. There will be some front to back swiveling there as well, which is actually quite cool. So you can roll his arm out, or you can roll his arm inward. The arm, interestingly enough, will only go that far out. But because it's still a 360, he can still do to the back, to the front. But yeah, to the side, not as strong. In terms of the elbow, I think he's got 2 elbows, so one elbow can pretty much do that here. So that's the lower joint of the elbow, but the other upper joint of the elbow can also bring his arm up. So he does get a bit of a 2 elbow bend, similar to Wheeljack, but his doesn't feel as fluidic. It does feel a bit encumbered. But either way, that's still not too bad to have the double shoulder here and here, given that a lot of the other Autobots just have the single, which is very nice. As for his wrists, it will actually have 360 rotation, which is actually different from other Deluxes within the line, in that most of them just have the fixed hand and wrist. That's pretty cool. In terms of the waist, he will have a 360 spin there, which will definitely help offset some of his head articulation. In terms of his waist, his hips will only do a 45-degree on the splits, because it will impact with his main body. His legs, however, can still go all the way to the front, and pretty much for only 45-degree to the back. And as I said, it was only about a 45-degree to the side. So his waist, well, not his waist, but his hips are a little bit, they're not flimsy, but they're not as expressive as some of the previous figures have been. In terms of the knee, let's see, what do we have? So definitely your standard 90 with a little bit more, but that is also just a single knee bend. But oddly enough, you will have a 360 at the knee. Now I think that's part of the transformation, but having some extra spin there at the very top of the knee isn't a bad thing. And as for the lower leg, there won't be side to side, but there'll be a little bit of side angling there at the ankle to a certain point before it starts looking really awkward. There's no rotation there, but there will be some upping and downing of the toe. So you can have a little bit of expressive feet, but not too much. So definitely overall so far, Brawn is probably on the, I don't want to say weaker side, but it feels like he has less fluidic points of articulation compared to some of the previous Autobot Deluxes. So it's not too bad. It's just obviously something to be mindful of. So now that we've had a look at articulation, before I transform him, most of his joints do seem fairly strong. He does feel a little bit weak in the shoulders. His hips, oddly enough, actually feel okay, and everything else seems pretty okay. So the only other place he feels a little bit weak, but not too bad, to be honest. It's just been the elbows. So I don't know, maybe it's just the difference between Takara Tomy and Hasbro figures. It's hard to say with some of the joints these days, because some are really good, some are okay, some feel subpar, but for the most part, Brawn seems fairly solid for his robot mode. So now that we've had a look at his robot mode, time to transform him and have a look at his alt mode. And with Brawn now in his alt mode, the transformation is actually quite intuitive. It's not overly involved. I think most of the transformation really just comes down to tucking his arms away and converting his legs. So before we get too into depth with things, so pretty much with both his accessories attached, so I dare say a bit of a drill bit attachment to his front and his main weapon on top. So from the front, side, the back, the other side, from the top down, and the bottom up. I know some of his transformation somewhat reminds me of RC because I know this is his main torso, and RC is quite similar as well, where her main torso is here. Her legs and arms are all around the place. Definitely not too bad with his accessories attached. Not too sure what his alt mode is supposed to represent. I almost feel like it's some type of mechanical digger type alternative mode, but regardless, it does look very cool. And even with all the weapons attached, as I frequently say, the Cybertronian vehicles don't look that bad at all with their accessories attached. Now if I was to take off the accessories, so if you take off this quote-unquote digger bit, you will need to also just flip this little connection down, so Brawn will have a nice little grill there, and if you take off the weapon, which isn't overly securely attached, and that's pretty much what he now looks like. So from the front, bit of an angle, the side, and the top. The top is interesting because if you look down hard enough, yes, that is the back of Brawn's head. So I don't know if I've mistransformed something or something else, or if he literally does have this interesting little hole space into his top of his head. Now, before we get too much into looking more at Brawn, that is also what he will look like ever so quickly against his backdrop. Not fantastic for video purposes, but I'll see if I can try and get some happy snaps later down the track. So, Brawn, your alt mode. Color-wise are all still the same, so the ochre is probably a bit more unified now. We are sprinkled with some of that nice olive green throughout. We do see more of the grey, a good view of the translucent window, and we do have some of these nice little detail areas throughout the vehicle chassis. So overall, definitely very, very nice. Colours are still very cool, and I don't know, for Brawn being Brawn, I still think this nice little smaller vehicle mode suits him very well. Detailing is good, which is pretty much a staple of this particular line, especially with these Cybertronian modes. So I definitely can't complain with that. The transformation, as I mentioned, it's mainly just within the arms and the legs, which is to be expected, I guess, for about 18 steps transformation. There is supposed to be some tabbing in here of the upper arms. Not that it matters too much because they're relatively secure in there. The legs do have some tabbing, so there's some tabbing here for what we now know as the front of the feet. Just tab onto the side and to open up some of this nice detailing. And there's two additional tabs. There's some tabbing just in here where the legs will connect up to this part of the top section, I dare say. And there's actual tabbing that then connects into the front of the wheels as well. So that actually stays together fairly solid, which is very cool. Articulation, being a typical vehicle, the only articulation is in these wheels. They are independent of each other, which is good. So one can definitely roll forwards and back with no problems. So definitely not an overall badly looking alternate mode, given that the movie definitely didn't flesh it out. So from a figure perspective, it's definitely good that we have them. It's a very interesting take on Brawn, and yeah, I'd say it's very solid. It's different. While some of the others have a bit more pre-G1 inspiration, Iron-Eyed Ratchet, Wheeljack being good examples, with Brawn you don't really feel how this suddenly becomes his, well, can lead into his potential G1 mode. But I thought his robot mode definitely did feel very solidly bulky for Brawn. So that is your vehicle modes. I guess what we can do is we will reattach everything. So that's that front quote-unquote drill bit, and then attaching the top. I wonder. Actually, it does feel more sturdy to attach it via the side as opposed to it using the peg on the bottom, but it does help mitigate some of that interesting gap here for Brawn's ultimate. So, final thoughts. Brawn's robot mode. Colours and detailing, as to be expected, are definitely on par. They're where they need to be. And I do like some of the more earthier tone colours for Brawn, which is very nice. It's good to have some of the Autobots with some wide spectrum of colours. Accessories are very nice. He's back to having 2 accessories as opposed to 1, which a lot of the other Autobots have. From an articulation perspective, he will feel he's going to be one of the weaker ones. Just because he can't pull off full ranges of motion. His head is a good example where it's only doing left-right. His hips will only do a 45-degree angle outwards, and things like that. So he has some limitations there, but at the same time, some of the articulation in the knee slash swivel within the top knee is potentially something that can be used to mitigate some of the limitations, and I think having the double elbow joint, I think potentially will also be something else that can also help. So I think some of the articulation there has been traded off for some of the visual aesthetic, but overall it's definitely not bad. He's not non-expressive and articulate with his posing, things like that, but I think some of the future shorts and pictures will highlight some of that. But overall, he's still a fairly solid robot mode. I think his main benefit is definitely more his visual aesthetic, not so much his playability. As for his vehicle mode, I think this is another similar thing where it's the visual aesthetic, not so much the playability. Visually, it does look very interesting. It's different from all the rest of the Autobots within the line, which is good. Definitely adds a lot more flavor between Ironhide and Ratchet having pretty much the same external look. Then you have B127, Cliffjumper, who once again, same look. Wheeljack, RC, Brawn. So I think between Wheeljack, RC, and Brawn, the 3 of them really help diversify some of the visual look. Very nice that he can attach both his accessories to his vehicle mode, which is a standard thing. I do like how he has that little extra bit with the front little, what I still call little drill bit. The color's very good. The playability, it's an alt mode, it's a vehicle alt mode, it's standard. The transformation definitely wasn't too bad. Did take just a little bit of understanding to get through things, but as an 18-step process, not bad at all. And some of the tabbing that will happen to keep everything together is definitely very nice. and it didn't take too long to do once you figure out things. And yeah, so I think transformation fairly intuitive. In terms of recommending Brawn, from a Transformers Bumblebee lineup, I would say yes. If you have an opportunity to grab them, definitely do it to fill out the Autobot roster for sure, given that it's a fairly finite roster. If you're a huge fan of Brawn, and I believe there are a good number of pro Brawn people out there, he's definitely a nice welcome addition to the collection, given that unlike other Autobots, he doesn't always get a figure. So it's definitely nice for him to get one in this particular line, and there are definitely a few cues back to what we would expect Brawn to be like within G1. Definitely a bit of playability there, and I think overall he'll definitely be great to look at with the rest of the Autobot lineup. So definitely no issues or regrets with getting him. It would have been nice to actually been able to get him domestically. So I'm very glad I've been able to pick him up through the Takara Tomy version. And to be honest, now that I've got a few Takara Tomy compared to the Hasbro ones, I don't think there's too much real noticeable difference. So despite some of the weaknesses with some of his articulation, Brawn overall is still a very solid and robust figure. And I'm really looking forward to once I get the opportunity to finish going through all the unboxings of all Transformers Bumblebee figures. I think there's only one left. But in terms of Cybertronian modes, Brawn was the last Cybertronian Autobot to unbox. So I do have all of them unboxed now. Most of them have been reviewed. Some are now all over the place, but I better catch up on them later down the track. So that'll bring us to the end of the unboxing and review of Studio Series Deluxe Brawn. It's definitely been fun to go through and unbox and review some of these Bumblebee figures, and I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully in a few weeks' time being able to do some of the final combined shorts of all the Autobots. As I mentioned a mere minute or two ago, there is still one more Autobot Deluxe unboxing to do before I then move into the Decepticons. Which will be interesting because I know the Decepticons have a lot of a few more voyages than Deluxes. If anything, they're actually probably on par, but time will tell how well they go. Thank you very much for watching this unboxing and review video. Feel free to leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel, and I do greatly appreciate it. Extra content can also be found on my Instagram account. Link to that will be in the description below. I'll also have a link to this particular figure of Brawn at Hobbylink Japan for those who are still trying to source a Deluxe Brawn. And at some point there will also be some additional content in the way of shorts, community posts, things like that. So keep an eye out on those as well. With that being said, stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video. So next week will be, well, next Friday, we're still doing a Transformers Studio Series Bumblebee unboxing and review for an Autobot. And then, as I said, flipping over to the Decepticons after that, as well as still sprinkling more Rise of the Beasts content throughout the week as well. So that's just trying to coexist with this particular Friday session of videos. With that all being said, take it easy, and I'll see you next time.